quick understanding of the Bible with 10 stories. The creation story in Genesis is one of the most famous and significant stories in the Old Testament. It showcases God's power and the beauty of His creation, while emphasizing the relationship between humans and nature, and the guidance and responsibility that come from God. God spent 6 days creating the world and all living things. Finally, God created humans, giving them authority and power as male and female. In summary, the creation story emphasizes God's power, the beauty of His creation, the relationship between humans and nature, and the guidance and the responsibility that come from God. It deals with the origins of the world and the dignity of humanity, and has had a significant impact on our understanding of purpose and meaning in life. Old Testament second story. Adam and Eve disobey God, eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and were banished from the Garden of Eden. The consequences of their disobedience are severe and far-reaching, including shame, pain, and death. Their banishment from the Garden of Eden illustrates the devastating consequences of sin and sets the stage for God's plan of redemption. Old Testament third story. The flood and God's judgment. God decided to destroy all living things on earth with a flood, except for Noah and his family, due to the wickedness of mankind. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The Lord was sorry that He had made man on the earth, and He was grieved in His heart. The Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land. Old Testament fourth story. The Tower of Babel. The people build a tower to reach heaven, but God confuses their language to scatter them across the earth. In the story of the Tower of Babel, people decided to build a tower that reaches to the heavens to make a name for themselves. However, God confused their language, causing them to be scattered across the earth. This story emphasizes the importance of obedience to God and the consequences of pride and disobedience. Old Testament fifth story. God calls Abraham to leave his homeland and go to a land that God will show him, and promises to make him into a great nation. In Genesis 12, God calls Abraham, who later becomes Abraham, and tells him to leave his country, his people, and his father's household, and go to the land that God will show him. God promises to make him into a great nation, to bless him and make his name great, and to bless all peoples on earth through him. Abraham obeys and takes his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot and sets out for the land of Canaan. Old Testament sixth story. God delivers the Israelites from slavery in Egypt through 10 plagues and the parting of the Red Sea. In Exodus we see the story of the Israelites' enslavement in Egypt and their miraculous escape. Despite Pharaoh's attempts to keep them under his control, Moses, through God's intervention, leads the Israelites out of Egypt. The 10 plagues serve as both punishment for Pharaoh's cold and hot, and as a demonstration of God's power over the gods of Egypt. The parting of the Red Sea is the climax of the story, showing God's provision and protection for His people as they journey to the Promised Land. Old Testament seventh story. The 10 Commandments were given by God to the Israelites through Moses at Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandments are a set of biblical principles relating to ethics and worship, which play a central role in Judaism and Christianity. They were given by God to the Israelites after they had escaped from Egypt and reached Mount Sinai. The commandments were inscribed onto tablets and covered topics such as worshipping only one God, keeping the Sabbath holy, honoring parents, and refraining from murder, adultery, stealing, false testimony, and coveting. Old Testament eighth story. After Moses' death, Joshua becomes the new leader of the Israelites and is commanded by God to lead the conquest of Canaan, the land promised to Abraham and his descendants. The first obstacle is the fortified city of Jericho, But with God's guidance, the Israelites march around the city for 7 days, and on the 7th day, the walls of Jericho fall down, allowing the Israelites to conquer the city. The Israelites then move on to the city of Ai, where they suffer a defeat due to the sin of one of their own, Achan. After dealing with Achan's sin, the Israelites conquer Ai with the help of a strategic ambush. Through these miraculous victories, the Israelites establish a foothold in the Promised Land. Old Testament mind story. After the judges ruled Israel, the people demanded a king to rule over them. Despite Samuel's warning about the consequences, God allowed the appointment of Saul, who later turned away from God, leading to the rise of David and the establishment of the Davidic dynasty. The story highlights the tension between the Israelites' desire for human kingship and God's sovereignty. Old Testament 10th story. The Babylonian exile was a significant event in the Old Testament where the people of Judah were taken captive to Babylon for 70 years. The Babylonian exile was a significant event in the Old Testament that shaped the history, identity, and faith of the Jewish people. It was a time of hardship and testing, but also a time of God's faithfulness and promise of restoration. The stories and lessons from the exile continue to inspire and guide believers today.